Welcome, everyone, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hayden Lee, and I am joined this week by a very special guest, long overdue. We were joking a little bit before the podcast that we had her husband, Justin, on early on in the podcast, and we now get to have, quote unquote, as Justin would say, his better half. I'm not putting words in his mouth. Kristy Sifford, president and founder of Wylander. Kristy, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
This is going to be a ton of fun. I kind of mentioned this before we started recording that I obviously have, I admire you guys from afar. We're partners here, Spot On Solutions and Wylander. But as far as the day-to-day marketing goes, I know you work with some of my team members like Melissa, and I know you guys do some really, really cool, awesome stuff. And so if for nothing else other than for my personal enlightenment, I'm excited to kind of get to chat with you a little today and learn how you guys are helping, especially an industry that we serve, restoration and home services. And so I'd love to kind of start just by, I know you guys and Wylander are pretty well known in the industry, but I'd love to start with kind of just your career background a little bit.
Sure.
Let's take some time here and kind of get people familiar with who is Kristy and talk a little bit about how you guys got to where you are today.
Great. Appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me. So I actually was a teacher for 12 years. I taught elementary school. That's what I did out of high school, went to college, got my education degree. My family owned a flooring store, and I think it was my mom's dream to have her kids take over the flooring store. And I did everything possible to not be involved in that business. So I taught for 12 years. In that time, Justin had started a flooring side of his own. He did hardwood flooring, specialty hardwood flooring in the DFW market. So on my days off and on the weekends, I did all of his bookkeeping and accounting. And then about 2010, he merged his business with a large disaster restoration company there in the DFW market. So they added flooring to that bucket. And he said, hey, why don't you come work full time on the flooring side as the bookkeeper, accounting, whatever we want to call it. So that's what I did. I left teaching, went to work with him, became the director of accounting at that company. I did not have an accounting controlling background. It was all self-taught through a lot of classes, learned from there. And if you would have asked me when I was teaching first grade, I taught first grade, that I would be a controller for, a $3 to $5 million flooring business, I would say, yeah, no, that's probably never going to happen, because I didn't know that I liked the numbers as much as I did. So that's my background. I fell into recruiting. We were actually recruited out of our business by another company. And this company wanted to start a recruiting division, and they said, here, we're going to start a recruiting division, figure it out. So that's what I did. So that's kind of how I fell into this piece that I do now on a day-to-day basis. It was definitely, it wasn't something I seeked out, I guess you could say.
Right. Wasn't how do they call it? Wasn't a traditional career path.
No, it was not. It was not.
I think it's so cool. And I want to kind of maybe talk about this point for a little bit, because I feel like most people should feel this way as well, but I have a special place in my heart for teachers. I think teachers are awesome. And some of my greatest role models in my life are teachers. My mom's a teacher. So I feel like there's some cool things to learn about that profession. And I feel like that probably in a lot of ways, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm way off on this, but I feel like a lot of the things you learned as a teacher probably have some application into the HR, hiring, recruiting type world, which you are in kind of day to day right now. Is that true? Is it not? And if it is, like what things have translated between the two?
I would say it is true. We're constantly educating our clients on how to do things.
Yes.
No, you cannot say that. Sometimes we have to speak to them in a manner where we're slowing down our pace a little bit, kind of like you would as you were teaching. So definitely, I think that's the patience. You have to have patience to work with a bunch of 6-year-olds who have an attention span of 2 minutes.
Right.
So that's probably the biggest thing is learned patience, for sure.
Well, and even in like the hiring realm and recruiting realm, I feel like a lot of the candidates that you're probably helping recruit and hire are probably pretty young. And so like you almost have to kind of educate them in a lot of ways about like this industry, and maybe this is their first real job out of high school, right? Like maybe it's and you kind of got to almost coach, like you're trying to recruit them because you think they might be a culture fit or their personality is really good, but you still have to kind of coach them on like, okay, like this is how you work
Right.
at a professional setting. There's probably some edge, and it's probably the same for your clients who are trying to recruit. That's like, here's how you build a professional setting so that you can recruit good talent, Yeah.
Right. Yes, for sure. So education, I mean, that can be the biggest piece. I think that some people can teach well. Some people, don't have the ability to lay out, the steps.
Right.
Not that that's a bad thing.
No. But I think that's totally applicable, right? Like it's like what you're talking about is like, and again, I think it's lost in a lot of like the home services world is that, so much of training in the home services world, when you first hire somebody new is, go follow so-and-so, go follow them around and learn how to do the job. Right. And I think like being able to lay out a process for training or lay out a process like what you do, lay out a process for hiring. Like it probably seems pretty simple for someone like you that was like laying out lesson plans every day, for your kids. But it really is like it's a skill that has to be learned and honed and practiced, right? And so I think like that's what's so cool about what you guys offer is like, hey, we're going to help you build a process for some key elements to your business, one of which being the hiring piece. So
yeah. And what's interesting is my recruiting to go back started in the flooring industry.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So there I was. I'm not getting into flooring. I'm not doing anything with it. And, I became an accountant for the flooring industry, and then I'm still recruiting in the flooring industry. We still do some recruiting in that industry. But the main bucket of our roles are within disaster restoration construction industry, probably 90% of them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting.
That's a cool
They
point.
say
go ahead.
They say once you get in flooring, you can't get out. It's just how it is. That's
it just sucks you down in there. Yeah.
It does. It just brings you right back in some way.
That's an awesome point. And don't let me forget to come back to that, because I think what you're describing there in my brain clicked that like there are probably, regardless of what industry you're in, there are probably some key principles to having like a good hiring process. And so I think I want to come back to, because I think without putting you too much on the spot, I want to come back to maybe we can identify what some of those key principles are. But I first want to hear, and I apologize because I kind of cut you off. I want to hear.
That's okay.
So you've obviously you were working in some hiring and some recruiting roles, and you eventually decided to kind of break out on your own. What was that process like? When did you kind of come to a point that you were like, we want to do this ourselves. We think we can do this either better or more efficiently, whatever.
Sure. So Justin actually was recruited out of the business first, to work for a restoration company in the Virginia markets. And we relocated. So I could not maintain the role that I had at that company. So we relocated. My goal was to kind of slow down a little bit because, the first 2 years of starting that recruiting division, I mean, I looked up and my 5-year-old was 7, all of a sudden, the blink of an eye. And so that was my plan. And the word got out that I had left that company. I had a couple of clients that were like, look, we really want you to still help us recruit. Can you do this for us? And I said, I'll take on a handful of clients. That was my goal, was to be a boutique company, right? work with a few select clients here and there. And then that just grew further. So the word got out a little bit more. And Justin decided to come on full time then with Wylander, and it's been full steam ahead since then. So basically since 2015, 16, 2016 is when we really pushed the gas. So, you know, we currently have, you know, 6 recruiters that work with us. We have a program director that handles our remote sales management program. And then most recently, as we were discussing earlier on the break, is we have an fractional HR management program. So for companies that can't hire a full-time HR manager, they just need somebody to update an employee handbook or rewrite their policies, or 10 hours a month, you know, be able to call and bounce something off an HR professional who has those skills to say, no, you can't fire them for these reasons. We have to lay out this plan first, you know, just to help protect the client as well.
Love it. Well, I think that kind of goes into something that I also wanted to mention is that you guys have been doing this for a while, and I think the story and where you come from as far as growing your business started as a kind of a boutique. You were just wanted to do a few clients, and then it got big enough and you wanted to bring Justin back in, and all of these things. You've probably seen a ton of changes over the last few years. I mean, you've been doing this. You said you really ramped up in 2016, but you know, 8-9 years, right? Going on 8-9 years. So like, how has hiring, which, you know, to your point earlier is mostly what you focus on, how has the hiring and recruiting process changed over the last 6, 7, 8 years?
Right. So it's definitely become more digital. That is 100%.
Yeah.
You know, there are a few job boards out there that have really become the powerhouse in all things hiring. You know, I mean, if you haven't heard of Indeed, then you're probably living under a rock somewhere. So, you know, people are using various methods to reach out to candidates. When I first started, I was not texting candidates at all. And now texting is like sometimes my first outreach to them if they have, you know, reached out to me, or if they sent over a resume, or I'll text them, introduce myself. And sometimes that first screening is all set up through a text message thread, because you leave them a message and you're assuming they're gainfully employed. They're busy. They're not going to answer a call that they don't know what it is. They listen to the message and are like, oh, that's great. I'll call her back later. And then my voicemail gets buried.
Yes.
Where a text message, and I tell my recruiters this, I talk about this in any type of education classes that we do, is don't send a text message that says, let me know when you're available. Send a text message that says, can you talk tomorrow at 10 a.m.?
Yeah.
Because they're immediately going to check their calendar and say, yes, I am available. And now it's scheduled. I'm not waiting for them to look at their calendar to see when they're available and give me a list of times and then need to go back and forth. Right.
Yeah.
So I would say that, you know, that's probably a really big thing, is the digital piece. You know, it's still a very candidate driven market, especially right now. I think everybody who's hiring knows that. We remind our peers all the time. We remind our clients all the time. And we use this phrase: your peers are also looking for the same people you are. Your peers
your
are
competition.
paying this,
yeah.
right? Your peers are offering a company vehicle for an outside sales rep, you know, so they know what the norm is, not where I'm saying, hey, John down the road, who also owns a ServPro, is doing it this way, right? We never want to say anything like that. But, you know, candidates now that have an excellent track record and they have been employed and have good work history, if they fall into a point where they're unemployed because maybe the company was sold and they combine some departments, they're not unemployed for very long, you know, because we're in such a digital age and we have LinkedIn and all of these, you know, media, social platforms where people are connecting all the time with each other. They have connections. They can easily, I mean, an estimator could go on LinkedIn probably today and say, hey, I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been working for my previous company for 10 years. I'm looking for a new estimating position. They were just purchased by a large company. They would get probably 50 plus responses within, you know, an hour or two of direct message me here, direct message me there. So it definitely speeds that up, you know, for sure.
Well, and yeah, the digital thing is so relevant. Not just in what you guys do, but what we do, right? Even with just with marketing, like,
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, Spot On Solutions started as a digital marketing
Mm-hmm.
agency, but what we do now is what is different than when we started 10 years ago. So like there's so many
Mm-hmm.
things that have changed. I love the texting piece. I think that's so helpful because like, yeah, like you've got to get in the mindset of somebody that you're recruiting. And if you're trying to get a really good individual, most likely they already have a
Mm-hmm.
job. And so you can't be calling them during the middle of the day when you're working because they're most likely
Mm-hmm.
also working. And so like something as
Yeah.
simple as sending a text versus an email or a phone call can really be a way to like set yourself apart. And it still feels personal. Like
Mm-hmm.
emails are great for a lot of things, but they can feel a little robotic at times, even if it's like a
Yep.
hand typed email. It's not a template, right? Like you type that out, like
Mm-hmm.
it can still feel a
Mm-hmm.
little robotic at times. And so like a text, it's still like typing, but it feels different. And I think
Mm-hmm.
as someone that's, been recruited, like it feels better to like have those personal
Sure.
conversations, And so
Sure. Yeah.
um I think that's a really great distinction between what it was a few years ago and what
Mm-hmm.
it is now. Um,
It's faster paced too. You
right,
know, I
right.
mean, 10 years ago, you could post a job on, Career Builder, which, they're not really in the blue collar space as much anymore. They are, but it's just not as competitive. But it's a faster pace. You can't post a job and hope that your dream candidate's going to apply to that job. We call that the post and pray method.
Right,
You also can't interview the rock star candidate anymore and think that you have 2 weeks to make a decision on that person.
right,
Right.
right.
So it goes back to, something I know that whole phrase, right? Hire slow, fire fast, right?
Oh my
Everybody's heard
gosh.
that, right? And I
I
mean,
was just about to
I
ask
don't
you
even
about that. We're
know.
thinking the
I
same
don't
thing,
even
Kristy.
know how old that is. And I agree with that. You want to take your time in hiring, but the problem is that you just need to be efficient in your hiring process.
Right,
Right. Just
right.
having a candidate sit there for 2 weeks and you thinking about it for 2 weeks is not really hiring slow,
No.
right? Somebody else is going to pick them up.
Yeah.
So you just have to be efficient and be methodical and move them through your process. That's the key. And because things are faster, there people are using AI. I mean, look at what Chat GPT does now. I mean,
Right.
it's amazing, right? And
Yeah.
we use it occasionally here, and I can see it learning. Even when I've asked it to write like blurbs about Wylander, where we have to put it like in a newsletter or something, it is literally learning about my business. It remembers it. It remembers our off airings and what we're doing. So it's crazy to me. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
where that's gonna go.
I love that you brought that up. And I got so excited because I was legit thinking, as you were saying, you got to kind of speed it up and be more efficient. I was like, but the saying is, and so, right. Like I was literally thinking that as you were bringing that up, but it's
Mm-hmm.
so true. And I think there's ways you can hire slow, like in that making sure this is a good candidate. I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
idea behind hiring slow is that you
Right.
want to really confirm that this is the right person. Well, you can do that without it being quote unquote slow. You can
Slow.
be,
Right.
yeah, like you can help that person, or you can help your team feel comfortable hiring that individual without having to take 2 weeks between interviews, right? Like again, I use the example of when I was hired at Spot On Solutions, and I talk to people about this all the time. Like I I technically had 3 interviews, but it was
Mm-hmm.
over the space of about a week. And then I was
Right.
hired and I had a job offer, right? Like it was
Mm-hmm.
like, so
Mm-hmm.
they did their due diligence. They, had kind of a phone screening. I sat down with kind of the initial person I talked to, and then I talked to Katie, and then Katie
Mm-hmm.
called to follow up. They did a personality assessment. Like they did all of those things which came through you guys,
We
I'm pretty
know
sure. Um,
because I think we sent you the personality
yes, yes, like
assessment.
it came through you
Right.
guys. Like,
Right.
but that all
Right.
happened in about 6 or 7 days, right? Like it happened fast. You still did the due diligence. You still had a process. You still followed and checked all the boxes, but it happened fast. And me as a, as an employee, like it was amazing because I've never been hired like that. Like I've gone through several month long interview processes and it's a nightmare. It sucks. And so like, it's so nice to be like, hey, I got an interview, or I got a phone screening, then I got an interview, and then I got kind of a follow-up interview, and I had a job offer. Boom. Like it was just super quick and easy for me. And Katie will talk about like it was still like a good, like she still followed the process. So like you can do the hiring slow, fire fast. You can still do that, but have a process in place that makes it more efficient.
Right. And you can still check every box under the sun.
Yep.
And the wheels come off 30 days later. It's going to happen. I mean, we tell our clients that all the time. They could go through our screening, your screening, even have your business advisor interview them and say, man, this person is great. Yeah, I would recommend that you hire them. And in 30 days, it's a train wreck. But that's there. You can't guarantee anything as a business owner, right? You just, you can't say, oh, I'm going to hire Hayden. He's going to be perfect and nothing's ever going to go wrong. It's not realistic.
No. At the end of the day, you're still dealing with people, right? Like recruiting, incorrectly or correctly, however you want to put it, but recruiting oftentimes falls under HR in a lot of cases, and HR is human resources. These are humans you're dealing with. And so there's going to be instances where we checked all the boxes. We had a perfect system and just doesn't work out. And so that you can't be, I think a lot of people or a lot of business owners are paralyzed by that fear to an extent that they're just like, man, I'm so worried. The last couple people we thought were perfect.
Right.
And then they fizzled out in a couple of months. And it's like, you can't be paralyzed by that fear because the next person could be perfect. It could be a long-term employee.
That happens a lot. We have clients or even better is they hired somebody from a company once and it did not work out. So like, I don't want to hire anybody from that organization ever again. And I tell them, you can't let a past experience necessarily dictate the future. It's what if the person's only worked there for a month? What if it's just, there's so many variables there that yes, that happens, but usually when you start to think about the candidate and what went wrong, they ignored flags during their interview. Even though they went through their process, they had kind of that thing in their back of their mind or like, it was kind of tugging at them, but they just really liked that person and they had a great conversation. So they ignored that. So usually after they dig in and think about it, the thing that went wrong usually was prevalent in some facet in the interview. Now, are you going to catch those every single time? No, it's just not possible. You just got to have a good process and follow it.
The Success Elevated podcast is brought to you by SOS Navigator. SOS Navigator is an on-demand training platform geared towards marketing, personal development, and business growth. We understand that as a business owner in the service industry, you wear a million hats. Let SOS Navigator be a simple and cost-effective way for you to continue to grow your business. Click the link in the show notes below and use code SOS Podcast to get 10% off your next on-demand training course. Well, let's talk about that process a little bit. And we don't necessarily have to go super in detail because I know obviously you guys do this for your job, but I'd love to kind of hear, you mentioned, again, I'm going back. My brain is working today. I want to go back because you mentioned, you were working kind of in the flooring industry and working on hiring and recruiting there. And now it's more kind of disaster restoration. I would assume there are probably some key principles to hiring good candidates that apply across different industries. And it's almost industry non-specific, like it doesn't matter, right? So is that true? Again, I'll probably ask that qualifying question first. Is that true? And if it is, like, what are some of those key principles across the board?
Sure. It's very much true. What we do for hiring a sales rep on the flooring side isn't going to be much different than what we do to hire a sales rep on the restoration side. Are the questions going to little different? Yes, because flooring is usually retail, they're inside, and restoration's outside sales. So those are two different lanes, right? Usually
Right.
somebody who's inside retail sales doesn't really like being an outside sales rep. For the most part, doesn't mean it's not impossible, right? Um, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It goes back to, you have to have a solid interviewing process. I
Yep.
mean, it starts with your impression of the candidate. If your communication with the candidate is poor, you show up late to an interview, you cancel the interview, it doesn't look good on your company. That is the first impression that it's making. And we have that conversation with our clients all the time. One of our biggest struggles is, we've submitted a bucket of candidates and now the recruiter's spending a week chasing down the client. Have you reviewed this person? Have you reviewed this person? And we're trying to let the candidate know, hey, we're still trying to figure out if they're interested, or whatever the script is that the recruiter says. But in the candidate's back of their mind is like, what's the deal? Do they not respond to emails? Is the recruiter lying? What's going on? You know, as recruiters, we've seen it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We really have, from clients missing interviews. And I know things happen, but I ask the clients, you know, when they're telling me, I'm like, what would you do if that candidate no-showed the interview? Would you give them another chance? And their first response is no. Well, why should the candidate give you a second chance?
Yep.
You know, I had an owner of a company, of a large company hiring a high level role, do an interview on a treadmill once. And I just was like, I mean, I could go on and on of the stories, right? Of things that owners or managers have done in that interview process. And I think we're getting out of that. You know, they're starting to see the benefit of showing a sense of professionalism, even though we're in construction. You want to have those steps, and the candidate wants to know, look, if your interview process is solid and you're taking them through these steps and you're doing what you're saying you're doing, then your systems and your process and your business, for the most part, are probably squared away. And you're going to have a good experience working in that company. Versus if it's the opposite, why would working for that company be better than the interview process?
Right. Well, and yeah, I think to just go back to that first piece is like, it really is, it's the first impression, like no matter what, like that, like that's how people are going to see you. And if the process sucked, I mean, they might not even decide to join your company if you send them an offer. But if they do decide to join their company, the first little while, they're going to be a little skeptical, be like, oh, well, I needed the money, so I'm going to join these guys. But man, the hiring process stunk, and so it just kind of sets the tone for who you are from the get-go.
Right.
And it would really be unfortunate if you didn't have, a process outlined, if you've got, recruiters, and not recruiters, but if you have your management team that's a part of the interview, if they're showing up and being unprofessional, and like little things like that, like can make
texting while on an interview.
Yeah, right. Like little things like that, like just make such a difference. It makes a huge difference. Or taking a call while they're in the interview, whatever. Like, and obviously stuff comes up, and there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, but the rule should be like,
of course,
take this seriously. Like if you want your candidates to take this seriously, then you should take it seriously as well. So that's a really cool principle that I think, again, we live in a world where a lot of the people we work with are owner operators. And so they're wearing lots of hats, but if you want to hire good people, you have to take these roles seriously. And it's important,
right?
I think one thing that I want to just mention at the hiring process, because I want to talk a little bit about outsourcing versus bringing it in-house. But before we go there, I know, one thing that you mentioned is we were kind of discussing what would be good ways, or what would be good things to talk about on our podcast. You mentioned that the hiring process doesn't stop after they've signed the offer, right? After they've agreed, they're like, they've accepted the role. What do you mean by that? What parts of the hiring process continue even after somebody has accepted the offer?
Sure. So sometimes we'll see they've done a really great job hiring. They have this awesome hiring process, but they don't have an onboarding process.
Wow.
They don't have a process in place for when Tom shows up his first day at work, what does that first day look like? What does the first week look like? The second week, the third week, the fourth week. So we always say your hiring process doesn't stop at a signed offer. You have to, part of your hiring process is the onboarding of that person. You know, just recently we hired a coordinator for a company and they sat around for a week without anything to do, no training in place. And they started to not perform very well. And the company got mad and they terminated him, which in the long run, was he the right fit? We'll never know, right? But the ownership of that is there was no process lined out for that person's success.
Yeah.
That's probably the tougher piece is now, especially as we hire more and more folks from outside the industry, it can be a little overwhelming. Where do you start them? Where do you start them? How do you get them going? What's their first step to get them, you know, up to speed? And we always say, you know, or Justin says it, and I'm probably going to mess it up, is even the best had their first day in the restoration industry. They did, right? Yeah. The best estimators had their very first day ever in the restoration industry.
Yeah. Yep.
They didn't, some of your best estimators didn't, not all of them came to you with this magic way of using Xactimate, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's just as important. And, you know, we have an onboarding process we share with our clients all the time. If you don't have one, here's a suggestion of what you should be doing with this person.
It's awesome. Yeah. I think a lot about this piece just because, you know, we've had some growth here at Spot On Solutions. It seems like we're hiring some new people every few months, and we've really had to dial in our training piece. And that's a crucial part to this whole thing is like this onboarding and this training is so important because what got you to, and we've talked about this phrase a lot, what got you to where you are today is not going to get you where you want to go. And so like, just because, oh, this is how we trained all of our estimators by just having them follow Bob around. And it's like, okay, that's cool. But if you want to really scale and grow your business, like you've got to have a better onboarding and training process than just shadowing somebody. Now, shadowing
unless you have 10 Bobs.
Right. So, unless you have just a million of them, right?
Which isn't going to happen.
But if that can be a piece of I'm not saying it can't be a part of the training and onboarding process, but it can't be the whole thing. It can't there's going to be some things like you have to have a system in place so that you can, you know, more effectively train and onboard these new people. And that's how you have that's how they're going to be the most successful. Cause not everybody, is just going to really, this just clicks for them. They shadow somebody for a couple of weeks and they're just rocking and rolling. That's not how it works for everybody. Right. Some people it will, and you'll get lucky with some of those individuals, but that's not how it works for everyone. So,
sure.
I love that onboarding training conversation. I feel like it's a common theme we talk about on the podcast quite a bit. And Katie's a big proponent of it. We've had multiple conversations with her where she mentions this is, you know, how much time you should spend every week on the training and the onboarding, because it is, at the end of the day, it's how you get your employees started on the right foot. And so super important.
Right.
I want to kind of, just shift gears here a little bit. Because I want to make sure we talk about this, because you guys are obviously, this is what you do. This is your bread and butter. There's probably a line between when someone should outsource hiring and recruiting, onboarding new employees. There's probably a line between, okay, you need to outsource, have somebody else take care of this for you. And then eventually you probably get to a point where you want to bring it in-house. Where do you feel like, do you feel like there's a distinct line? It's probably not, but where do you feel like that line is between, hey, you need to outsource this, you need to reach out to somebody like Wylander, versus you could probably do this in-house. You have the capacity, you have somebody that can handle this on your team. Where do you feel like that line is, and how, as a business owner, could I know that, oh yeah, this is what we need to do?
It's really a capacity thing, right? I mean, recruiting is, we say you should always be recruiting. And, smaller businesses, they're not going to have a dedicated person in the office that can review resumes every day, make those outbound calls, be really focused on that's all that they're doing, right? That's all that our recruiters are doing is they are in that lane all day long, making phone calls, calling candidates. You know, so it's not hard to answer, but we work with $80 million restoration companies that have a dedicated recruiting department. And they call us when they need somebody that's just direct in that niche role. That's what they're looking for, right? Somebody that's going to just do a ton of outbound reaches to those passive candidates, really scour LinkedIn and make those connections, where the in-house recruiter is not only working on that role, they're probably looking to fill the other 20 that are across the other locations, right? So I think can the person in your office, are they able to handle reviewing those resumes, making those outbound calls, searching for people, sending those text messages? And if they aren't, then you definitely should look at outsourcing it, because it's all a numbers game, right? How much money are you losing in your business by not having that position filled?
Right.
The longer you go, by not having that extra estimator, how many leads are you not able to estimate because you can't get to them? Or project managers, because you can't produce the work. You got it written, you got it sold, but we have a production problem. So I think that there's a balance there. I do think that when you get to a certain volume, and I don't know what that volume number is, all companies are different, it's probably time to have somebody who is focused on making sure your career site's correct on your website and everything's updated, and they're reviewing those applicants that are coming in, and they're working with other branch managers and what their open roles are, right? Because especially the number of laborers and technicians that are hired, it's a bunch. And you hire more of those people on a day-to-day basis than you do estimators in your business, right? Because they don't tend to stay around that long. It's just the nature of that position. But yeah, I think it's a capacity thing. Can the person that you've been assigned do this? Do they have the ability to dedicate to it 100%? And if you have your HR / bookkeeper / office manager / mom of the office doing that, her plate is already full, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a great way to describe it, because that's, at the end of the day, that's just about every role in your business, right? Is at some point you're going to hit capacity at some role, whether it's, you need more technicians, or you need more estimators, or you need more project managers, whatever it is. It goes the same for this hiring role. And if you don't have the capacity right now and don't feel like you can bring in somebody full time to just, that's all they're focusing on, then that's a great opportunity to reach out to somebody like Wylander. So, Kristy, thank you so much. This has been super insightful. Like, I appreciate it. It's been fun to kind of pick your brain and learn about the process and how we, onboard employees better and have a process in place to actually hire and recruit. If there are individuals, and I'm sure there are, that are going to be listening to this, that have more questions for you, that want to learn a little bit more about how you can help with the hiring and recruiting, or HR, or, we didn't even really talk about it much, and we'll have to have Justin back on, but the sales management piece, whatever it is,
right?
Where can people learn a little bit more about you guys? Where should they reach out to you at?
So they can go to our website, which is www.wylander.com. That has a contact form, our phone numbers, emails, and everything is there for them to get in touch with us.
Awesome. That's Kristy, Justin, and their team there are a wealth of information. They've helped us in a lot of cases. I've experienced a Wylander hiring process, and I can tell you it's very pleasant, and it's not like your typical process. It was very enjoyable. And if you are feeling the need, if you're feeling the pain of hiring and dealing with that right now and recruiting new employees, it sounds like it's probably a perfect opportunity to reach out to the team over at Wylander. So go check out their website, wylander.com. That's where you can find out all this info. Kristy, I want to wrap up by asking the same 3 questions that I ask all of our
Yeah.
guests. Those are, it's a great way for us to kind of, compare answers and look at, all the cool insights that we have from individuals across industries. We have a lot of people come on the podcast that don't necessarily work in the same industry. We have a lot of people that work in restoration, but we've had some other individuals, and it's fun to see how so many answers are similar in a lot of cases or can be wildly different. And so, first things first, you got a favorite book or podcast that you're reading or listening to, or that you've read or listened to recently that you've really enjoyed?
So this will be on a personal level.
Yeah.
I finished a book. Justin said, I'm glad you read that because there's no way I could read it. I became super intrigued with the British monarchy. So I read
Okay.
a book from like the beginning of the British monarchy all the way through to Queen Elizabeth.
Okay. Very cool.
And now I'm reading a biography on her. So very intriguing. She was just a very strong woman.
Oh yeah.
Just crazy the
We
stuff that she went through.
My wife's been super into what's that show on Netflix? The Crown.
The Crown, yeah,
Yes, which has
yep.
been very, I mean, it's obviously super dramatized, but it's cool. It's been kind of cool to learn about some of those things. And I mean, when you think about like when she became queen and everything she had experienced between the aftermath of World War
Right.
II and all of these things. And anyways, just, yeah, really, really cool stories and stuff.
Just how
So,
she handled it. It's
oh
crazy.
yeah.
Yeah, we've seen it. I cried like a baby at the very last one because I knew what was coming.
Yeah.
We were actually in Paris with Justin's mom when she died. And Justin's mom went back to Texas and we jumped on the train and went to London for some of her procession stuff. So
Oh, wow. That was
it
probably cool to
was
be a part
really
of.
awesome.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I don't think that it would be hard to see our country come together like that, like they did. It was just insane to
Oh,
see
that's cool.
just
That's so
how
cool.
organized it was and peaceful. And it was great.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
second question. Thank you for that. That was an awesome answer. Second question. I know you wear a lot of hats. I know you're a mom and you have to, balance work and home and all of these things. How do you recharge the mental, emotional, physical batteries at the end of a long day? What do you do?
I cook a lot.
Love it.
I like to cook and bake. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Katie will let you know that. So, yep, love to cook, love to bake. I've actually sent her husband Jonathan a couple like videos on how to make certain stuff.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, and I've heard
videos.
about these famous meals when you go to Captiva together when you guys will get an Airbnb and all stay together. And I've heard they're
Yes.
very famous. So you are world renowned chef Kristy
Oh,
Sifford. So
at
it's
least to
awesome.
Idaho, right?
Yeah, at least in Idaho, we know you really well. So, anyways, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cooking's this cool thing. I think we've mentioned. I want to say somebody else has mentioned something similar on the podcast because we talked about there is something cool about like, and I don't know if it's like just part of our ancestral DNA or whatever it is, but like there's something cool about cooking for somebody else. It's like you're giving you're giving something, but it's different than just like giving a gift or something. It's like you're giving life almost. It's really, really cool. And it's a great way to like get outside yourself at the end of a long day to just be like, I'm gonna make a meal for my family, or I'm gonna cook something for my wife or whatever. Like it's a cool thing to do. And like, yeah, there's something very primal about it that just makes you feel good. So I love it.
Yeah. Justin will tell you that I'm making him fat, but I mean,
You're giving life. That's what you got to tell him. He's like, no, I am providing life. Okay. That's what you got to
I'm
tell him.
providing life. That's a
Yes.
good. I'm going to do that next time. Okay. Good.
Last question, and feel free to take this whatever direction you want. But if you could rewind to maybe the beginning of your career with Wylander or the beginning of your career in recruiting, whatever you want to do, and tell younger Kristy one thing, what would that one thing be?
Mine would be, I mean, probably even younger than that, would be to take more risks when I was younger.
Yeah.
There's things that as I've gotten older, Justin and I talk about it all the time, moving overseas, right? We always wanted to live overseas. And now we have kids that are 20 and 15, and convincing them to move overseas is like never going to happen unless I bribe them with large sums of money, which we're not going to do that. Probably taking those risks and just doing it. But I was so bound to not change and staying in my lane. Nope, I'm supposed to go to college, get a job, get married, have kids,
Right.
Just veering off that path was difficult for me. I mean, I'm a little bit better now, where I even joke now, if my two boys came up to us and said, okay, we'll go anywhere with you for 5 years, we'll give it a shot, I think we would probably do it. Wow. We can work anywhere,
That's cool.
I think we would give it a shot and let them experience that. We've always told them, and they've traveled, to Europe, is there's so much out there. There's so much more out there than what's just in your backyard.
I love it. That's a great lesson. I think for just about everybody, take some more risks, whatever it is. Take that job offer that's across the country, or, take that class that's a little outside your comfort zone, whatever it is, right? Like there's go take a few more risks in your life. And, I think that's great advice. And I think in large part, I mean, you guys, you and Justin have done that with Wylander. You took a risk and were like, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to break out on our own. And I think, I don't know if you would agree with this. I think you would, but I think it's paid dividends for you guys. It really looks like you guys are just doing some awesome stuff. We're excited to be a small part of that in some small way. And, it's been fun watching you from afar, just really do some really cool things. So,
awesome. I appreciate that. It's fun. It has its ups and downs for sure.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, Kristy, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was super, super informative. I know our audience is going to love this. Appreciate all of your insights into both, your personal life and into Wylander. People, if you're interested in learning more, go check them out, wylander.com. You can learn about all things hiring, recruiting, and how to, elevate your team that way. And again, just really appreciate it, Kristy.
Thanks, Hayden, for having me on. I appreciate it.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe on YouTube or any other major podcast platform to listen to more episodes. We are proudly brought to you by Spot On Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you grow your business, please check us out at spotonsolutions.com.